Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Advice Guru Later Life Lending podcast. Well, we're delighted to be joined today by a guest who we haven't spoken to on the pod before. We have John Somerville, who's the Director of Financial Services at the London Institute of Banking and Finance. Well, that's a mouthful, John. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Stuart. What we'll say is it's fine to call us LIBF. And we're well known for LIBF, but actually, the brand London Institute of Banking and Finance has a bit of a history, but we have a history of changing our names regularly as well, as it happens. So people sometimes know us as the IFS going back. We were the Institute of Bankers in 1879 is how we were formed. So, and then became the Chartered Institute of Bankers, and I had various names over. But 146 years old this year, actually, as it happens. So, as an institute, we are long-standing.
Well, Stu and I are very pleased to welcome you. Hello, Stu. We haven't said hello. How are you doing?
Hello. Yeah. It's great to be here as usual, and it's great to see you today, John. Thanks for joining us.
An absolute pleasure. Thanks, guys.
And I know that you and John go back a fair way. Is that right?
Yeah, John, you and I, we've spoken many times. We've been on attended events together. We've done filming together. We've done all sorts, haven't we? So I know you very well. I think you know me pretty well.
Yes.
But we don't like to assume that all of our listeners do. And so just be great to maybe kick this off with a little bit of a potted history, maybe not going back 145 years, but a little bit of potted history of yourself, and how you ended up at the LIBF, and then maybe segue maybe into then your role at the LIBF and what the LIBF actually do. If that'd be great for our listeners, just to sort of catch up with who you are and what you're all about.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for that, Stuart. And yes, I actually was reviewing some of those old videos a little while ago, especially some of our pandemic ones, believe it or not. They're still on YouTube, believe it or not. So some good stuff on there. Thanks for the introduction. And started... Oh my word. So 1993 was when I started as a financial advisor for general accident. So this sounds like, no, trust me, I'm going to be brief here, guys. So Stuart knows me. I'm a big talker, so I will try and keep this brief. So 1993 as a financial advisor, I moved in, I've done loads of different roles. So sales management, sales director, head of regulatory L&D, various different roles. And this is for companies such as, my first company, General Accident, became Aviva eventually, AXA, Legal and General, Intrinsic, which is now Quilter, Nationwide Building Society. And all of this kind of led me to where I am today. So at LIBF, joining 6.5 years ago, wanted to take my learning but bring it to a new generation and bring it to new learners and bring people into the industry through the roles that I have. And I've been very, very lucky to be able to give back, through the Institute, through learning, through education, which is what we're about, through qualifications and learning. For those that don't know LIBF in a brand in its own right, they'll certainly know CMAP, and CMAP is our mortgage qualification developed by us 27 years ago. So it's been long standing. It is the brand when it comes to mortgage qualifications. But we also continue to offer diploma in financial advice, level 6, chartered status, banking qualifications, and basically we're known for professional education across the UK. So we also have that and internationally trade finance qualifications as well. And then the other side of what we do is we actually offer degree programs, so degree apprenticeships and higher education programs, several degrees on campus and online. And our new owners, who are the IU Group, they offer extensive international degree programs, all offered online, very similar in concept to the Open University, but more sort of an international flavour. And we're growing very, very quickly as far as that's concerned, which is amazing. So, watch this space for the next steps for us, I think.
Fabulous. And clearly, and that is one of the reasons why I wanted you on, John, because you're very heavily involved in and passionate about, I know, very passionate about the need for education, the need for qualifications in this industry, and encouraging people to engage with those and to increase their professional development. And an advice guru very much attuned into that, aligned with that in terms of our focus on education. Maybe want to come back to that actually, because I think we could probably go almost full circle on that and talk a little bit later about the latest initiatives that LIBF and yourself were involved in around bringing new talent into the industry. But bringing it back right up to date in terms of the market as we see it today and your role in it. I know you're very heavily involved in the later life lending market as well, and we've seen you at lots of events, and last week's events that Air held, the Fit for the Future event, which I want to come on to talk about in a moment. But give me your sort of sense of where the sort of key issues and questions and concerns are from your perspective in terms of the later life lending industry and where it finds itself at this point in time.
Yeah, very challenging for them. But first of all, congratulations on your award. I think that's worth mentioning as well. Of course, clearly, well deserved. So very, very pleased for you guys. I think you did you well deserved what you do. The education, not just of advisors, but also of the public, I think is really cutting edge and certainly very forward thinking. I think that you deserve everything you got there. I think the later life industry, and we need to start referring to it as that, get rid of the equity release moniker. I think that's had its day. It has precisely that problem. Identity. What is it for? What's it trying to do? And then secondly, of course, we need to get away from advisors who are product selling. There's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of advisors who are struggling because of rates and they're not actually thinking about the need of their individual customers. There's some very, very brilliant advisors out there who do a fantastic, phenomenal job for their clients. But it's a bit more than just equity release now. And what we've got to try and get people to focus on is getting rid of these advice gaps, get rid of these siloed thinking that goes on in that industry, and start thinking about actually, how do I plug my education so that I can understand where my customer needs are, do some proper, thorough fact finding. And this is sort of going back using all of my knowledge and experience and education over 33 years in the industry, to go back over all of that and say, thorough fact finding has not changed from the day I entered the industry to today. What you ask for has evolved clearly, but the best fact finders always do the best job for their customers. The solutions come as a result of what you understand of your customer, not what their motivations are for, what a product looks like. And this is the real sort of differentiator. And our industry is broad. It's huge. And so the knowledge that is required across all avenues of advice is tricky, a very, very difficult job to do. Hence the reason why forging alliances with partners, forging alliances with introducers, forging alliances with specialists in the industry, whether they work within your firm or not, and having clearly defined introductory contracts and introductory services, I think is the way forward. If you look at what the FCA are trying to introduce when it comes to the advice boundary guidelines review, they've been trying to bring in a sort of lower line of advice to plug the advice gap. So there'll be an educational need there as well. And that will hopefully introduce first careerists coming into the industry. And I think that's a really sort of positive move in itself if we can get everybody to support it. But I think overall, an understanding what you can do and what you can't do, but the things that you can't do, making sure that you don't do any foreseeable harm for your customer through consumer duty, and making sure that everybody's served in the correct way, I think is absolutely vital. And only way to really sort of reinforce that is through education. Most advisors have done their qualifications 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. What have they done to update themselves today to understand if you're working in later life lending, do you understand the latest pension legislations? Do you understand the latest inheritance tax changes? Do you understand all the things that are going on in our industry? And if somebody can hand on heart say, yes, I definitely understand all of those, then they're probably doing the job really, really well already. And if you don't, then it's probably worth getting your knowledge up to date.
John, you used a really key phrase there that I liked, and that was forging alliances. So I guess my question is who and how. Who's doing that well, and how are they doing it? We know we don't want siloed advisors just advising on one product, but to forge alliances is not the easiest thing in the world. And there's a little bit of suspicion when you approach another advisor wanting to use their knowledge and give them some of your knowledge to help both of your customers. So do LIBF get involved in that side of it? Who and how?
No, we don't, but obviously I'm, lucky enough and well connected enough to experience where as an observation, you see it done really, really well. Some of the networks do it exceptionally well. There's no doubt about that. I'd rather not name names here, but clearly, if you're in larger firms or if you're in networks that really promote this, then they tend to do very, very well on this. It's the smaller advice firms, which of course do make up a considerable amount of our industry, that find it a challenge. It's not that they're not doing it. It's the kind of, probably a skills thing that enables them to sort of negotiate with those firms that can help them out in these circumstances. Yes, I agree. There's a certain lack of trust that comes into this as well. But we can only get there together as an industry, and by just saying no because I don't trust the firm down the road, well, surely there's an ethical set of behavior and stances. And one of our exams is an ethical exam, so people should understand that ethics forms a very strong part of what it is we're trying to do, and that ethical stance is vital.
Sure, I think that's a really good point, actually, because the uptake of the Advice Guru website and directory has been largely driven in its early months by individual advisors. So exactly what John's saying there, we're seeing that they don't have this network, and that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it was interesting. The panel that you sat on last week, John, which was all about at the Fit for the Future event that Air held, was all about the sort of future advice, future of holistic advice. And it's interesting that there doesn't even seem to be any kind of common consensus around what do we mean by holistic advice and what does that really look like. And I guess this feeds into so many things we've just been talking about: the silo approach to advice, the advice gap, the lack of trust, the lack of interconnected networks. It seems to be something that we're still struggling with as an industry. And to Stuart's point, when a brand like Advice Guru does come along and starts to offer those kind of services, advisors are clearly keen to engage with them, but are still struggling to really understand how to do that well. Would you agree?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. I think that half of this is leading people to an area where they can understand how to do this really, really well. Having the skills and knowledge. We're finding this with what we're putting together with the New Talent Alliance, which we can come on to shortly. What we're trying to do with that is to bring a set of data, of information, of practical help for small firms in order to bring new people on board, because they don't have that. They haven't got that information to hand. They haven't got somebody that could coach them or manage them to help them do those sorts of things. And consultancy is expensive, so it's not an easy thing to do. And this is the same thing. How do you get a firm to put a formal agreement in place for referring clients between each other, making it transparent, understanding what the charges structure looks like, both from a client perspective and each other? And these contracts are there not when things are going well, so 2, 3, 4 years ago, when advisors, rates were low, advisors were doing very, very well. It's never really a problem. It's when things aren't going so well that you need good firm contracts in place to say, right, okay, well, this is the definition of what this handoff should look like. This is who the client belongs to. Does a client really ever belong to anybody? You have to ask that question, let's be fair about it. and the client will only tell you what they want to tell you as well. And that is, and if they trust you, they'll tell you everything. If they don't, then you'll find that they use somebody else for something else. But it's very, very important to have these formal arrangements in place. That way the trust then can be developed. But of course, where'd you go to get that information? Of course, I think as an industry, we can really help them. But unfortunately, Stuart, you and I have been talking about silos from year dot. And I think one of the things that came out of one of the panels, which was very interesting, I think it came from Kelly Melville Kelly. I don't want to misquote her, so I'll be very clear about this. But she said effectively that the industry's had 2 slaps on the wrist. It won't tolerate a third one. So that later life industry, another slap on the wrist from the FCA could be a very, very difficult thing for it to recover from. And, the likelihood is some sort of sanction would come as a result. And I think that, getting away from these silos, making sure customers are treated in the way that consumer duty, the spirit of the consumer duty is put in place, I think is really, really important.
Yeah. That way, and it was, you're absolutely right. It was Kelly, and I think she was spot on with that. You've just touched on something as well that I think as I was sitting at the back of the audience listening to that debate going on, I think one of the advisors in the audience raised a question, and it transpired that they had some arrangements in place for introducing clients, but they said they were quote unquote not formalized or not.
Yeah.
I think there were several people in the room, myself included, sort of did an audible gasp and like, what do you mean?
I know.
And I think that sort of underlines though the challenge that we face as an industry, isn't it? That there are these situations that occur. There are these relationships that are in place that are not formalized. And whilst there are probably good intentions there on behalf of those advisors, the detriment or the potential detriment to the customer and to the business, actually the advisor's business, is immeasurable, isn't it? And it's a clear danger, and probably not going to help us solve this silo issue, is it?
No, far from it. I mean, it was me that asked him why.
That's right. Yes, it was.
And his answer was really robust. And interestingly, on the panel, 2 seats away from me, was his director of compliance. So yeah, it was let's just say it was probably good the way that I'd asked the question back, because we were able to kind of elaborate on the fact that it really is crazy not to be in a position not to have something formal, because it protects everybody. And let's be fair about it, we were doing formal introductory agreements when I started in the industry in the early 90s. This is nothing new. You would expect that. And this was sort of back in the days when you used to have estate agencies referring mortgage referrals through to the Life Office, and the Life Office would then go away and conduct the mortgage research, which was done through the Pinks, by the way, and that was there was no search engine that would allow you to sort of find the best mortgage deals. You literally thumbed through the pages to find the best deal for your client back then, and it was a really long old process. There's no doubt about that. But God, thank God for technology. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, off the back of that debate, and I think, say that example used there of the advisor that had sort of the informal relationships and all of the I'm sure the ticking off that he got afterwards from his compliance director. But does that make you more pessimistic about the future, or did you come away from that event feeling as though we're still heading in the right direction, albeit there's more work to do?
Yeah, I think so. I think the reason why I came away positive, and I did generally feel positive coming away from it, is that things are not great. It's not we've not recovered as it's not just later life mortgage advice and financial advice. It's had a very, very difficult, challenging time because of the way the economy is, because of the cost of living crisis, because of various other things. We're not in recession. I was commenting on this yesterday. We went shopping, right? Okay. So, yes, it's January and we went shopping. And we went to my hometown, Worcester. I went to go and visit my mum at the same time. And the town was dead. I mean, there was nothing going on. So, and I was thinking, well, there's not a recession going on, is there? But there is a big cost of living crisis, and people are worried about not only their jobs, they're worried about, how much they're earning. They're worried about the electricity bill. They're worried about the gas bill. All these things are going on. So it's a really, really difficult time for customers. It's a really difficult time for advisors. So advisors tend to be a little bit more brutally honest when things aren't going right for them. So they tend to be then get very, very vocal around the things that are wrong. Whereas when things are right, when things are on the upward spiral and they're doing lots of business, they tend to moan about servicing, and they tend to moan about, I'm not getting the best deal. I could be getting better, and it takes me a long time to find things, blah, 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 blah. Whereas at the moment, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say navel gazing, but there's certainly a lot of inward gazing around, things are difficult enough as it is. What I don't need is X, Y, and Z. But I thought that the questions that were being asked were actually constructive, generally speaking. People were challenging us as an industry. And also what was refreshing was the industry, or certainly the panels, were challenging back. There was no quarter given.
And to each other as well.
Well, I think so. I think there was a bit of that. It wasn't like, they weren't gladiators baying each other at the Colosseum or anything, but it was, there was certain, a reality check and an honesty check. But there was no ill feeling around that. I think it was more a case of, actually, maybe I need to look at this. I need to look at the way I run my business in a different way. I need to look at the way I approach customers. I need to look at the way we can't keep talking about the same things over and over again, and then nothing changes, because that's when the regulator starts taking an interest, especially if you start getting complaints. We often get, one of the things that I get questioned about is, when are we going to make mortgage qualifications and CMAP a level 4 qualification, right? And I always say it's not going to happen, which of course is, takes people aback, really. And the reason for it is that actually in the mortgage sector, there isn't a complaints history, and the FCA aren't taking a particular interest in it. And if anything, if you look, they see that as a way to boost the economy. So actually reducing restrictions when it comes to lending criteria is something that they've mentioned to the Labour government, as we saw in reports last week. So so they're not worried about mortgage advice, but they're worried about later life advice, and they're worried. They're always worried about financial advice. Quite clearly, always given those guys. Ever since I've been a financial advisor, there's always been something going on. But certainly, later life, I think, is one of those sort of interesting things. And the other one was, ongoing CPD. Well, okay, it's not mandatory to do ongoing CPD for equity release advisors, or later life advisors, or for mortgage advisors, except that you should make it mandatory yourself to keep up to date, and not just on product. And this is the problem. The priority always ends up being of maintaining my product knowledge. Great, that's good, but what about your advice knowledge? What are you doing to update that? When was the last time you took a qualification just to review your knowledge, just to make sure that you're doing the right things for your customers? Have you done anything on later life, long-term care, as an example? Or have you done anything on pensions or investments or whatever that helps a client to understand what the implications are of taking lump sums of money that they may not have had before? And this is another thing in the later life industry. You are giving the property rich, cash poor people lump sums of cash that they've never had before. So who's going to help them manage that cash? Well, interestingly, it's usually for a purpose, but when they do have that sort of money, then there's a taxation implication potentially. There's a care, there's a state benefit implication. There's an investment implication, taxation when it comes to the interest on their payments, on their money, and all that sort of stuff. And appreciate that this is small amounts of money, but there is something that can be done to ensure that customers get the very, very, very best treatment and the very, very best advice.
Absolutely. And I think that leads us quite neatly on maybe to think a bit more about the future then. We talked about your takeaway from the event. And I think you're saying you're generally optimistic and encouraged by what was discussed there, as was I. I think the only thing that I worry about, I suppose, is that those kind of events and others like them are great, but they tend to be the same people. You're kind of preaching to the converted, because the equity release industry was once a very small village. You could argue that it's become a reasonably sized town now that it's got this later life lending bracket around it. But in order for it to become a city, a proper city, we need more advisors. We need greater collaboration. We need younger advisors coming into this market and picking up the mantle and really exploring holistic advice in all of its shapes and forms. So what are your thoughts and input to that in terms of the way the industry is heading, and what's LIBF doing about trying to encourage those kind of trends in the future market?
Yeah, these are enormous challenges. I think you're right. Later life is definitely heading in that direction. And if once it takes off again, which it will, hard to predict when, I have to say, but when it does, and I don't think any rate decreases are going to suddenly be the magic cure for the challenges that we have in the industry at the moment, but it will turn around because the need is always there, and if we go and see that need, then it will be delivered. But I think it's first and foremost, I started when I was 23. This is the funny thing about advice. Here I am, middle-aged white guy, sat in a seat that actually we should be looking at diverse younger people coming in and taking this seat. Well, I'm not going to give up my seat easily, but I do want younger people to come in and take this away from me at some point in the future. And I think that's the right move. But what I would say is that when I get to a point where I think actually whatever advice I need in later life, I want to have somebody who is much younger than me, who can take care of my needs for the foreseeable future, for the next 10, 20 years. Now, if I get an advisor who's the same age as me to come and give me equity release advice or to give me pension advice, when I really need them in another 10 years, they're going to be gone as well. So, they're not going to start a new relationship with a new person. So, and anybody that thinks that young people can't form a relationship with an older person I'm going to say it, they are deluded. It is absolutely ridiculous to think. Now, I was advising people who were retiring when I was in my early 20s, and not once did somebody say, "You're too young, I'm not going to take your investment advice." Nobody said that. It didn't happen. But the other thing that's the same from when I was much, much younger, because when I started in the industry, I was the youngest person in my region for the following 10 years. There was nobody that came in younger than me. And it was just, that was number one, ridiculous. Number two, a team of 10 people, and there was only ever one female in it, ever. And funny enough, that really hasn't changed. If you looked around that room last week, guys, you'll probably corroborate with me. Yes, I mean, there are a few ladies around, but the diversity is not there. I mean, it clearly isn't when you look around those rooms. And that's the thing you see, like you say, Stuart, we are bringing the same people, converted people, but where's the younger people coming through? Where are the first careerists? Where are the people coming through that think, actually, I've left college, I've left university, and the first job I want to do is financial advice or mortgage advice or later life lending advice, because it's a brilliant career, because it's given us a brilliant career. It's given us a life that, we probably wouldn't had if we'd gone into other industries. I absolutely love what I do. I've always have done. Why don't people think, actually, I'd like a bit of that as well? Because it is a great life as well. It's flexible. And not only that, if you look around, just look on this podcast, none of us, we haven't been advisors for years. It's been a long time since, but the careers that are available within our industry, marketing, clearly, technology jobs, data science jobs, actuarial jobs, all these sorts of back office processing roles, power planning, and then you get to the advice roles as well. The industry is not just, it is a city right now, Stuart. The trouble is that the most of it is hidden underground, and the rest of it is, the facing stuff is sort of there. So what are we doing about it? LIBF are, and something I instigated last year, are the secretariat for the New Talent Alliance, part of the Consumer Duty Alliance run by Keith Richards, a well-known industry figure. And we are there to really encourage new talent into the advice industry. Now, the New Talent Alliance is there to support the small businesses in recruiting younger people because they don't have the resources or the backup to be able to do that for themselves. So we're creating that infrastructure website with lots and lots of information on it. So look out for that through Consumer Duty Alliance. You'll see that the New Talent Alliance will have a full website, very, very, very close to being launched. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll have it up and running and it'll be live. We also have a LinkedIn page as well through New Talent Alliance. And that's what we're doing. We're helping those businesses to recruit younger people because it's so easy to recruit a 40-year-old white male to come into your business and then just carry on without much training, get on and go and see some of these clients and off you go. It's difficult to get somebody with no qualifications to bring them through the qualification standards and at the same time teach them how to do the job and to be productive. And then once you've trained them, the real risk, which is they'll move on to another firm down the road. So engendering that loyalty and rewarding that for people who want to come on and stay on with your firm.
Sure, I love that. I love the idea of that that body and the website and everything. I think we should give our listeners a link to that and perhaps put something on Advice Guru because you know that's exactly what we want people to be doing. So can you just name check them again?
Yeah, so it's the New Talent Alliance. I can't remember the website clearly because I haven't got it in front of me. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. If we put a link into it, once I get it for you on the podcast, we'll make sure anybody can. But if you hunt down New Talent Alliance, or if you go to the Consumer Duty Alliance website, which is pretty simply www.consumerdutyalliance, one word, .org.uk off the top of my head, and New Talent Alliance will be a link off that. So that's basically where that sort of sits. Hopefully I've got that right because I know you don't like editing these podcasts.
We had the head of the Consumer Duty Alliance on a pod last year, and he was a very interesting guy. So
yeah, Keith's a good guy. He really is. Yeah, he's we've I've worked alongside Keith for the last couple of years now on Consumer Duty Alliance and what we can do as an organisation to help them out. The other thing that we're helping with, and we're just about to start being very much a part of, is the Future Financial Advisor website, which is done through Money Marketing. So the Future Financial Advisor website is there and designed to help youngsters find a place in financial advice. So as you can see, between the two, marry those two things up, and we've got a proposition to help young people into financial advice. The funny thing is we're much muted advice gap that we keep talking about. And I'm not going to quote statistics on this, but it's an enormous number of male, stale and pale individuals who are going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years, leaving considerable number of financial advisors needed in the industry. And a lot of people are worried that that won't get fixed. I actually think it will do, because I think, there's one thing that we are good at within financial services is spotting an opportunity, and there are people who will understand that actually getting people involved in it will help that situation. But, I think the Langcat quoted recently that only 9% of the UK population gets serviced by a financial advisor, and 91% of those really valued the experience. So it's, if you wanted to build a business model and you were an entrepreneurial spirit and you've just left college or university and think, I want to make a mark, where do I start? Well, there's 91% of the UK population that want your help.
Oh, God, I think that is a fantastic point to end what's been a really interesting conversation. So thank you ever so much indeed for joining us today.
My absolute pleasure, guys. And you know, as I say, first of all, many congratulations again. Well-deserved reward, or award, I should say. And no, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'd love to come back at some point if you've got, if I haven't upset all of your listeners. So
We'll definitely have you back on,
No,
John.
that's
It's been
cool.
great speaking to you.
Thank you.